On Sunday, June 12, 2022, country crooner Toby Keith, via Instagram, announced he was diagnosed with stomach cancer last fall. In Keith's candid social media post, he relayed how, in the last 6 months, he'd been receiving chemotherapy and radiation treatments in addition to undergoing surgery. He wrapped up the post by saying so far, things had been going well and that at the moment, his main priority is to breathe, recover, and relax. He further said he's looking forward to spending time with his family and that it's his hope that he'll see his fans sooner than later. At the time of the announcement, Keith was on tour promoting his new album, Peso in My Pocket, and was scheduled to perform in Illinois and Michigan on the 17th and 18th of June. It appears, however, these tour dates are postponed indefinitely. So far, the details we have about Toby Keith's medical condition are somewhat sparse. Until Sunday, Keith's fans weren't even aware he'd been dealing with such a dire medical situation. But the little we do know at the moment is pretty grim. 55% of people diagnosed with stomach cancer at any stage will succumb to the disease within 1 year of receiving the diagnosis, and only 20% will survive their cancer for 5 years or longer. That number drops to a mere 15% at the 10-year mark. Despite this morbid reality, it's wonderful to see Toby Keith speaking so optimistically about the future. If anyone could defy the odds and overcome this terrible disease, it's him. Keep watching to learn everything we know so far about Toby Keith's stomach cancer diagnosis and how it's impacted his professional career so far. He released his latest album last year. Toby Keith Covell was born in Clinton, Oklahoma on July 8, 1961, to parents Carolyn Joan and Hubert C. Covell Jr. He had 2 siblings and grew up in Fort Smith, Arkansas, and later Moore, Oklahoma. In Arkansas, his mother owned Billy Garner's Supper Club. It was there that he worked odd jobs and developed an interest in music. When he was 8, Toby was given his first guitar. Eventually, he started getting up on stage with other musicians who would perform at the Supper Club and play with the band. After his family moved to Oklahoma, Keith attended Moore High School, where he played defensive end on the school's football team. After high school, he worked as a derrick hand in the oil fields. He worked his way up to becoming an operations manager. When he was 20, Toby formed a band called the Easy Money Band with a few of his friends and started performing at local bars while still keeping his job in the oil industry. The industry began to decline in 1982, and Keith soon found himself out of a job. For a short time, he fell back on football and played defensive end with the semi-pro Oklahoma City Drillers. While he loved tossing around the old pigskin, Keith never gave up on his love for music and continued to play with his band whenever possible. Eventually, his football career prospects dried up, causing him to shift his focus once again to music. For the remainder of the 80s, Easy Money played the honky-tonk circuit in Oklahoma and Texas. In the early 90s, he made his way to Nashville, where he began busking on Music Row at a place called Hound Dogs. In between street performances and playing sets at local bars, Keith handed out copies of the demo tape he and his band had made. At first, there wasn't any interest from big record companies to sign him. So, feeling depressed and defeated, he returned home to reevaluate things. He had made a promise to himself that he would either land a recording contract by the time he was 30 or give up on his musical ambitions. And he was almost ready to make good on that promise when a stroke of sheer luck landed his demo tape into the hands of Mercury Records exec Harold Shedd. Keith had given a copy of his demo to a flight attendant who happened to know the executive. After giving it a listen, she knew Shedd needed to hear it. After Shedd reviewed the demo and loved what he heard, he went to see Keith perform live and signed him on the spot with a contract with the label. Keith put out his first self-titled album in 1993. His first single, Should Have Been a Cowboy, went to #1 on Billboard's Hot Country Songs chart, and by the end of the decade, the song would receive more than 3 million plays on the radio, making it one of the most played country songs of the 90s. Keith went on to release 19 studio albums over the next 3 decades. Over the course of his career, he's charted 61 singles on the Hot Country Songs charts, including 20 #1 hits. His worldwide record sales have exceeded more than 40 million, and he was even awarded the National Medal of Arts by President Trump in January of 2021. His most recent album, Peso in My Pocket, hit record stores and digital outlets on October 15, 2021. It peaked on the U.S. Top Country Albums chart at number 25. Before we tell you more about Toby Keith, be sure to give this video a like and subscribe to Factsverse if you haven't already. Peso in My Pocket took 5 years to write and produce. Keith's latest record is the first studio album he's put out since 2015's 35 Mile an Hour Town. He began writing for the album while staying in a house he owns in Cabo San Lucas, Mexico during the pandemic. The pandemic had forced him to take his most extended break from touring in his career, and while this could have discouraged him, it actually did quite the opposite. Keith saw the opportunity presented by being forced to stay put for a while as a chance to reconnect with his creative roots. The album's first single, Old School, debuted on Billboard's airplay chart at the highest radio entrance point of his professional career. But even though he hadn't put out an album since 2015, it's not like he'd been dormant. During this time, Toby wrote the Clint Eastwood-inspired song Don't Let the Old Man In. The track has since been covered by artists like Willie Nelson and Engelbert Humperdinck. Some have even called the song one of the most outstanding writing achievements of his career. While living in Mexico, Keith was isolated from his fellow music collaborators. Instead of rushing back to the US, as many of his associates had, Keith hunkered down and got to work writing new material. He spent months tinkering with lyrics and composing guitar riffs while trying to tap back into the energy that had given birth to many of his previous hits. The album's title track showcases Keith's trademark wordplay while flaunting his signature sense of humor, while songs like She's a Drinkin' and Thunderbird harken back to the country glory days. As the world had begun to get back to normal, Keith was eventually able to get back to Nashville and record his new creations in the studio. He's canceled his upcoming tour dates. When Toby Keith made his announcement that he'd been diagnosed with stomach cancer, he was on tour promoting his album. He was gearing up to play a string of shows, including June 17th at Chicago's Ribfest and June 18th for the annual B93 Birthday Bash. He was also slated to play the Ohio State Fair in Columbus on July 28th. He has since canceled these dates to focus on recovery. Toby's philanthropy work. For years, Keith has supported a nonprofit Oklahoma-based charity he co-founded called Allies House, whose aim is to aid children with cancer. The organization gives directly to children who are battling cancer. For years, Keith has supported a nonprofit Oklahoma-based charity that he co-founded called Allies House, whose aim is to aid children with cancer. The organization gives directly to children battling cancer. The charity is named for one of Toby's friends and former bandmate's daughter, who, before her second birthday, was diagnosed with a rare form of kidney cancer. While the child received multiple rounds of chemo and radiation, countless treatments and surgeries, she sadly lost her battle with the disease in 2003. The charity provides housing and palliative care for families of juvenile cancer patients, while also providing them with financial assistance to receive the care they desperately need. Now it's time to hear from you. What's your favorite Toby Keith song? Let us know in the comments section below. And before you go, make sure you give this video a like and subscribe to Facts First if you haven't already. Click the bell icon to stay updated on all our latest content.